Before we look into the details of Section D, let's have a look at a brief summary of Section C, as it is the most complete aspect of Offa's Dyke according to traditional archaeologists, and if so, we can see whether or not their ideas of it being either a border or defensive line is actually feasible. Number of sections in Section C is 97. The average bank width is 11.27 metres. The average bank height is 2.49 metres. The average ditch width is 8.55 metres. And the average ditch depth is 2.4 metres. Features within 200 metres of the dike include 60 springs, 73 quarries, 9 ancient sites, 1 single barrow and 3 Roman sites. Most importantly, the total length for Section C is 55,905 metres. Total missing gaps are 17. Total missing dike is 7,990. That's 14% of the total. Therefore, the average gap for every missing length is 470 metres. Again, we must state, of all of the sections A to E, C is the most complete, yet 14% with 17 gaps are missing. This is just another mathematical proof that the idea of it being a boundary marker or a defensive strip is completely irrational. We should now go into Section D to discover how many more gaps and how many more quarries we can find in this area. This section starts with Offa's Dyke coming out of the River Severn, which should ring alarm bells with archaeologists who fail to understand that this section of the dike is on a floodplain, where a 1 to 3 metre ditch would automatically fill with water, especially if it's close to a river. This is a very straight alignment, unlike the 90% of the dike over the hills, which have wibbly wobbly paths as they search for natural springs in the landscape. This would consequently suggest that it's probably either Roman or even medieval in date, as opposed to prehistoric, as we saw in the last section, Section C, before the 3-kilometre break. The start of the dike is interesting, as we can see how the floodplain caused problems in construction. The dike starts straight and then goes for a walk around the block, no doubt because of flooding around the current town of Neath at the time. Quite amazingly, this dike heads straight for one of the largest quarries in Britain, but disappears into the river just before it reaches it. Yet archaeologists have failed to understand the direct association between dikes and quarries. This could only be explained as there is an overriding concern to find how these features were either conflict barriers or markers in the landscape, which has blinded them to the most obvious of empirical evidence. Clanimanic Hill Fort, according to Historic Wales. The monument comprises of the remains of a hill fort, the largest hill fort in Wales. Its trees, scrub and grassland cover the ramparts, enclosing the entire isolated limestone plateau of an area of 70 hectares. The hill itself has been exploited for its mineral wealth since at least the Roman period. The uneven topology of the hilltop having to be complicated by the cut-in spole tips and tramways associated with the later minings of the quarry, possibly spanning as much as 2 millennia. They then continue to date it even further back in time by suggesting that piecemeal archaeological interventions, which have produced a range of features and finds across the site, including a roundhouse, burial and evidence for construction of defences and the Bronze Age industrial activity, when the water mains were cut through the eastern parts of the ramparts in 1981. The Bronze Age activity and the association with the Dyke is of great interest to us, as it would be the method of transporting the quarried materials away from the site to the sea. Moreover, what we found in this site was a discovery of brass, which was more valuable than bronze, as it is gold in colour and easily cast. We know that the last date of this manufacture was 363 BCE, but as buried soil has passed beneath it, the deposits are clearly post-dated the bank. So this date could be much earlier. Moreover, it should be noted that brass making is wildly more difficult than bronze making, as it's made from zinc and was only established in Britain in the 16th century AD. So it is more likely they found bronze rather than brass. And it's next to Offa's Dyke that runs through the circumference of the site, which helps date this feature and the date of manufacture. On this section, Offa's Dyke seems to come out from a quarry once again. This quarry mines lead and limestone. The limestone would have been of interest to the Romans, and the lead would have been of interest to prehistoric civilizations. What you will notice in section D, and as we fly over the LiDAR map, it is covered in quarries. Too numerous to mention and name, and in fact, to give you an insight, there will be 110 quarries on this flight, on this section alone. This shows clearly the reason the Dyke was made. This hillock contains a dike that appears after a dry river valley and then disappears into a river, not returning on the opposite bank. In fact, there is a gap of 236 metres. The only logical solution for this section is that it's an independent dike that existed in the prehistoric times where the river levels were much higher than today, and it was built to service the quarry that appears on top of the hill. According to Fox and the OS maps, Offa's Dyke starts at the top of a cliff face. But the reality is that another dike was below, coming from the river to the same location. This suggests that the original dike started at the edge of a prehistoric shoreline, and once the river levels had fell some hundreds of years later, another dike was cut to join to the old dike. Also notice the deep quarries on top of the hill. These dikes, which once again changed classification from the last section, would have serviced these to take their goods to the river. Towards the end of this section, we also find another gap, which could have been avoided by going north above the watery ravine. What's most interesting about this section is that the method of construction, the depth and height of banks. These are different from one side of the ravine to the other, indicating a different time of construction. This section is covered with large quarries, as we've already suggested, some of which lay directly to the side of the dike. One would imagine that if these quarries were post-dike or modern, then the quarrying would have obliterated the dike, but they haven't. Therefore it seems that either the quarries were there before the dike, or that the dike and the quarries are contemporary. What we find now is that the dike disappears into the River Severn and is not seen again for 2.3 kilometres. This is without any reason nor logic, unless it's an independent canal built for just the locality and the quarries within its path. At this point, we could go several different ways and connect Offa's Dyke into numerous different locations, but we'll continue on Route A, the traditional route, to see exactly what we find. This section is of great interest as it comes out, or goes in, to a gigantic ravine. The Dyke is the small black bank on this photograph to the right of the exit. This raises several questions apart from the obvious of why. If the Dyke was defensive and the ravine was dry like today, attackers could just come out early round the back of the Dyke. And if it was a boundary marker, are ravines now going to be counted as boundary markers as well as rivers? There's lots of ravines in section A not used as boundary markers, and dykes are therefore cut at top of cliffs. This alignment can only be for one reason: to continue the waterway of the raised shorelines of the prehistoric past along to the Dykes Canal ditch. As we go along this section, there is a Bronze Age camp 300 metres to the northwest of the Dyke, with signs of ditches and a footpath branching from the Dyke to the camp's ditch system. Is this another clue to the dating of the Dyke when it was first used? This missing section of 2,221 metres is in flat, flooded plainland. Where we do get bits of Offa's Dyke, it is very straight, and therefore it's our conclusion that this came at a later date and is probably Roman. The only interesting feature is Cadwagan Hall Mound, and it's part of a natural hillock and earthworks situated within a small field lying to the east of Offa's Dyke. The mound is approximately 42 metres in diameter and 2.5 metres high. We estimate that it's actually a fire beacon on the river, and again it helps to date Offa's Dyke. This section has a strange 30-degree course change over the flat ground. Looking at this section, we see the specification of the Dyke actually changes again, and so I would imagine it's of different time periods. What is quite noticeable from the LiDAR map is there are a couple of dykes going over the flat plain. One that looks older is going north, connecting to Offa like a T-junction, and then a second to the left of Offa from a ravine also joining as a T-junction. This section of Offa's Dyke offers us a clear indication of why they used prehistoric canals and the goods that were transported. We know that coal was a major fuel used by the Romans to heat their bathhouses and homes. It also used in furnaces to smelt metals, and hence had great value commercially, and therefore was traded throughout Europe. This trading would have started long before the Romans came to Britain, and may be one of the reasons for the invasion. For coal can be found on the surface and what archaeologists call bell pits, the like we have seen throughout Britain by the sides of dykes, including Offa. From is one of the biggest coalfield collieries in Britain, and it goes straight through Offa's Dyke. Or did Offa's Dyke aim and go straight through the coal mine? This is the end of section D. Come and join me for section E and the conclusion to this journey in the next video.